happening, everyone? Depending on where you are watching from, if you're like me and you live in the UK, you would have felt it's got cold. It's got really, really cold. And I don't know about you, but when the temperatures drop and winter starts closing in, the very, very first thing that my body wants are soups. Lots of different types of soups. So it makes total sense for me to share a roasted squash soup with you guys today. I'm going to be using butternut squash, red curry squash. There are so many varieties of squash available. So if you have access to different types of squash, go and explore, go and get creative. Maybe try this recipe out with crown prince squash, kabuka squash, delicata squash. The list is endless. So to keep up with the whole warming, comforting theme of this video, the other recipe that I'm going to be sharing are these cod parcels, these ginger and sesame cod parcels. Oh my goodness, they are incredible. To go with the fish, I'm going to show you guys a seasonal root mash, and then we're going to saute some mushrooms to go on top. This bowl is, like I keep on saying, it is so good. As always, let me know if you try them out. Let me know how it goes. Like the video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to my channel, and I'm just going to let the food do the talking. Let's jump straight into this week's recipe. Let's go. So for our roasted squash warming autumn soup, we are going to be using some onions, some garlic, some ginger. That's going to be the base of the soup. Fresh thyme. You could definitely use some fresh sage, or fresh rosemary would work really well. So to add a smooth, creamy feel to the soup, we're going to be using some coconut milk. We want full fat coconut milk. So we're going to use some parsley, some thyme, some oregano, some cumin seeds. A definite addition to any autumn, winter warming soups are leeks and celery. It's just a must. So I picked up these extra sweet, delicious carrots this morning, and I'm also going to be placing them in along with these crisp apples, which work so well in a soup like this. So any squash around this time of year will work wonderfully in this soup. I love to use red curry squash, which probably comes as no surprise, and I'm also going to be using a butternut squash, so I'm going to kind of combine the two. So for extra depth and flavor, we are going to need a really good stock. I am using some homemade chicken stock. Obviously, if you are plant-based, vegan, you could opt for a vegetable stock. So these are all of the wonderful seasonal warming ingredients that we are going to be throwing into our soup. So the first step is to chop up our squash and put it to roast. Be very careful when you are doing this. Make sure you have a good sharp knife and that you've got a steady hand. Scoop the seeds out and then place the squash on a large flat baking tray. So season up with some sea salt and a good grind of black pepper. So I like to drizzle in a little bit of coconut oil and just give the squash a little rub. This is just to make sure it doesn't go dry, but you can opt out of using coconut oil if you don't want to. So I scattered over some thyme, and then I placed the squash flat on the baking tray and placed it into a preheated oven of about 210 degrees Celsius. So I'd say leave the squash in for about 40 to 50 minutes. You just be the judge of it. You want to make sure that the squash has softened up and is cooked properly. So whilst the squash is roasting away, we can prep our other vegetables for the soup. So I chopped up some leeks and I gave them a really good wash. I then peeled and chopped the carrots. Of course, you can leave the peel on, but just around this time of year, I find that they're a bit bumpy, so I prefer to remove the skin. I finally chopped up some celery, and I chopped those crisp sweet apples into big chunky pieces. So chop up some onions, finely chop some garlic, and roughly chop some ginger. We are going to blend the soup. I usually grate ginger, but for this, chopping is fine. I placed some coconut oil into a pot. Again, if you don't want to use the oil, you can definitely leave it out. So we're going to throw in the onions, the garlic, and the ginger. We're going to give everything a good mix. Seasoning with a little bit of sea salt, some black pepper, the dried herbs, and some cumin seeds. So I continued stirring until the onions, the garlic, and the ginger had softened. So throw in the chopped vegetables, threw a little bit of turmeric in, and cooked everything down. Everything was sizzling and smelling delicious. So continue cooking for about 6 to 8 minutes. You want to keep everything moving in the pot. You can also turn the heat up a little. So we are going to throw our stock in. I threw in my chicken stock. And then I used a little bit more black pepper. So I placed the lid on and I removed the squash from the oven. At this point, the squash is going to be oozing with flavor. It's going to be sweet and caramelized, and that is exactly how we want it. Steaming hot roasted squash is one of my favorite things. So we're going to continue by either scooping out the squash, or you could actually peel the skin. Whichever way works easier for you, you do your thing. So remove the lid from the soup and place in the roasted squash, followed on by pouring over that creamy coconut milk. So whack that heat up. We want to get the flavors intense. We want to cook that soup down. We want to make it as delicious as possible. So you need some heat for this. So you can adjust the flavor at this point. Give it a little taste. If you need to adjust the seasoning, do that. I threw in some fresh thyme leaves and I adjusted it with a little bit more black pepper. So pop the lid back on and cook for a further 10 minutes until everything has properly cooked down, that squash is softened, the soup's thickened up a bit. So the great thing about this soup is that you don't have to have a high-speed blender. You can actually eat it as it is. You could leave it chunky, which I love doing sometimes, but I don't know. Today I just felt like a smooth blended soup. If you do have a blender or a high-speed blender, we are going to place the soup into our blenders and then we are going to whiz until smooth. I also like to adjust the consistency. I don't like my soup super thick, so I added a little bit more of the stock and just kind of thinned it out until I was happy. So this is the consistency that I like my soup. It was time to place the soup into the bowls. So I topped the soup with some crispy chickpeas, which I've showed in a few videos before. So I'll link a video in the description box showing you guys how to prepare these. They're really simple. So I poured that velvety soup into a bowl and I topped the soup with those crispy chickpeas. They are so yum. I drizzled over a little bit of olive oil, the usual, black pepper, and this is the soup. This soup delivers everything that I would want in a winter soup, all the flavor combinations, all the different ingredients that we use, and I know you guys are going to adore this one. So next up, we've got ginger and sesame cod parcels. When I say simplicity, delicious and effective, this recipe is everything. So we are going to top the fish with some leeks and some cherry tomatoes, as well as the sesame and ginger seasoning. For the mash, we are going to be using some regular potatoes and we're going to combine it, no surprise, with some red curry squash. So to prepare this creamy root seasonal mash, we are going to start off by tackling this red curry squash and peeling these potatoes. So for the red curry squash, begin by peeling it and then using a sharp knife, cut around the center. So you want to cut around the seeded center. Then chop your large pieces of red curry squash into smaller chunks. So simply peel and cut the potatoes, placing both the red curry squash and the potatoes onto a steamer. If you prefer to boil, you can do that, but I don't know, I'm just so used to steaming vegetables that I steamed them until they were soft. So I placed the steamed potatoes and squash into a bowl. I scattered over a generous amount of sea salt, some black pepper, and I placed in some butter. Of course, you can use an alternative if you want to, or you could just use olive oil or coconut oil. Just depends how you want to get your mash creamy. So mash away until everything is creamy, fluffy, and delicious. I needed a little bit more sea salt and some black pepper, so I went and added a little bit more in. So to prepare our sesame and ginger cod, place the washed cod into a bowl, scatter over some sea salt, some black pepper, some minced garlic and ginger, some red chili flakes, some dried thyme, a good splash of tamari, a drizzle of olive oil, and a good squeeze of lemon juice. You could definitely use lime juice as well. So I scattered over one of my favorite condiments, which is a Japanese condiment. It's called Gomasio. It's just toasted sesame seeds and sea salt. It's delicious. But if you don't have Gomasio, of course you can use regular sesame seeds. It will still be delicious. So make sure the cod is covered in all the seasoning. You can let it sit for about 20 minutes to 30 minutes. I honestly wouldn't leave it for too long because of the lemon juice. So I finally chopped up some leeks. This is to top the fish with, and I used some cherry tomatoes as well. So I placed the fish onto some greaseproof paper wrapped in foil because that's what's going to keep it all together. And then I placed on top the leeks and the cherry tomatoes, and I drizzled over some more of the seasoning and wrapped the fish up. Placed the fish into an oven of about 190 degrees and cooked for about 25 to 30 minutes until the fish was cooked. Obviously, this is going to vary depending on the size of your fish, so just make sure it is fully cooked through. To top this meal off, I just felt like sauteing some mushrooms. You guys have seen me do this. They're just tamari mushrooms splashed with some tamari, some sea salt, some garlic powder, and some dried thyme, cooked down until golden. So once the cod is cooked, remove it from the oven. It is going to be smelling divine. So grab a bowl or a plate, whatever you want to use, and place on that creamy root seasonal mash, which is steaming, piping hot. So place the cod on top with those cherry tomatoes, which would have got so juicy and so sweet. Place on top those tamari mushrooms. How incredible does this look? Oh my goodness, this was such a good one, guys. Let me know if you try this recipe. Let me know if you try the soup recipe as well. Thank you guys for your support. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you guys have a good week. I will see you guys very soon in my next video. See you soon. Bye.